Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Today I'm joined by the wonderful Tara, Jane, or TJ, and Chris from Televate in the first of what's going to be a series of four webinars looking at lead generation. So starting sort of from the top of the pipeline and then closing the deals and then how to turn customers into evangelists. I met TJ at a CompTIA event in Birmingham. I think it was last year when she was giving a presentation looking at the entire sort of sales, marketing and sales process. And it was absolutely fascinating. She's an incredibly engaging speaker. Chris, I've known for a little bit longer. He was the marketing director, so head of marketing at one of the large cloud distributors in the UK. And him and TJ have ended up working together. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Certainly. So thank you, Ben, and hello to everybody that's taken the time out of their busy schedule to join today's webinar. So my name, as you can see, is Tara Jane Sloan, and I'm the co-founder and managing director of Televate Lead Generation and Marketing Solutions. Televate now has been running for just over 4 years. But my background is quite a long time, 37 years in terms of lead generation and telesales and telemarketing across a whole series of different industries and sectors. So it's quite great to be able to share the experience that I have, and hopefully by the end of this session, demyth certain of the beliefs that you may have or that the industry may possess as a whole. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'd like to hand over to Chris.
Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Chris Bell. I'm the Group Marketing Director of Televate. But as Ben mentioned, I was previously head of marketing at one of UK's largest cloud distributors. And as part of that role, I was working regularly to support our MSP clients with their marketing strategies. I met TJ because I was actually a client of hers. So I saw firsthand great service that Televate offered. And when the opportunity came up to join the business, I absolutely jumped at it. So really looking forward to today's first session, of which Tara Jane will be doing most of the talking. But we'll introduce the next sessions now.
Okay, so before we kind of kickstart into this, I just kind of want to set the scene. So I am working from my home office today. And sadly, we are in the lap of the gods when it comes to hopefully no disruptions from the four-legged friends that I've got who are sharing the office with me today, who are royally named Rona and Charlie. So they're trying to be well behaved. But if I do have to go on mute and Chris has to jump in for me, it's because I'm trying to get them to be quiet and stop barking. So I just wanted to set that expectation. So as Ben was just saying, and as what Chris has just alluded to, we've been very, very privileged to be able to work with the Cementum in bringing to you all what will be 4 sound bites or 4 episodes to do with lead generation within the MSP or the IT or the VARS community. So we've got our heads together and thought about what are going to be the 4 most important value-adding events, or should I say sessions, that we can run for you. So the first one that I'm going to take the primary lead on today is just literally looking through a myth-busting session, as you can see there, that really shines a light onto the real world of generating leads. We all know quality leads can be a little bit of a dark art. And sometimes there can be misconceptions around how you go about to generate great quality leads. But also, there's also a lot of unknown activities that are associated with that actually can either make or break a great marketing journey. The second webinar that we'll be doing, this will be hosted primarily by Chris, and it's going to be the back end of February, I believe. He's going to be sharing with you, once you've got those leads into your business, how do you then stabilize that sales pipeline? So looking at processes that not just add new leads into your business, but actually how do you go from a position where you've got a new client, but then you keep them trading with you? The third session, I'm going to be taking the reins for that one. And it literally is going to be a case of a deal or no deal. So you've got the prospect, they seem interested, maybe you've done a demo with them, but why aren't they taking you up on your offer? Why aren't they being responsive to you by way of the quotation you've submitted, or maybe even ghosting some of the calls or the contact you might be reaching out with? And then last by no means least, Chris will be taking up webinar number 4. And that's very much about, you've won the client, but what now? So how do you turn your clients into loyal and growing customers, and ones that ultimately can go on and recommend and refer your business as a provider to other businesses that maybe they've got relationships with? So without further ado, let's go into the first slide. So that's sharing a little bit about the sessions. So for any of the audience that perhaps saw me talk at the CompTIA event, this was a slide that I hold very dear to my heart, and that is, when we look at the decision-making cycle that is now, it has dramatically changed to what it was like maybe 20, 25 years ago. So if we put ourselves in that position over 2 decades ago, our clients, and even yourself as a consumer, it was pretty much a very, very simple 4-stage process. You decided you wanted a product or a service. You found out a little bit about it. Maybe you spoke to some colleagues, maybe you spoke to some people who use that particular product or service. And then generally a field rep for that particular product or service would come and see you, and you'd make a purchase and the transaction would take place. Fast forward to where we are now. Those touch points in terms of available for people to review your business and your proposition has increased to between 14 and 16 touch points. So that just goes some way to explain why, whenever you have a prospect, why sometimes it can take so long to get them over the line. It's not necessarily just because they've got a current provider that's facilitating the product or the service that you offer, but there are so many touch points now for a consumer, any buyer for that matter, to review what you do. So if you think about yourself, you see things on social media platforms, you'll see web banners, you'll go on to referral websites, you maybe look at a blog, you then speak to people who've maybe used that service or that industry before. So it's no wonder, as I say, that buying cycle from the point of inception through to getting an autograph on a contract can now be up to 6, 9, or even 12 months, particularly in the world of IT. So what I'd like to do now, so this is a very holistic cycle of what a B2B buyer decision-making process looks like by way of touch points. But this is where I'm just going to hand over to Chris, because I think what he's now going to share with you is exactly what those touch points look like by way of the world of IT.
Yeah. So just before I dive into that, something that we forgot to mention before we started, there are a couple of questions that we'd like you to answer, just to be a bit interactive, to get your input as we move along. So we've got a couple of Slido slides coming up. So if you could have your phone with your camera app ready, just to answer a couple of simple questions, just to help make it all a little bit more interactive, and they'll be coming up pretty shortly. So the next slide, I'm not going to claim that this is my own. This is something that I have taken from Gartner. It's something that I reference quite often. The philosophy behind it is that the buyer has, at any point in a buying decision, there's 4 primary stages, and that's the yellow box in the middle. So it's the problem identification, exploration, requirement building, and supplier selection. And what we have to do as marketing and sales, or people or business owners, whoever's driving that activity, is just be aware that one, if you get in a conversation with anybody at any of these stages, you've got to be able to change your dialogue in reference to kind of the signals they're giving you in terms of what type of information you're looking for. But from a marketing perspective, you need to think about this as a funnel, so that you're generating campaigns and content that is going to capture interest from your audience, but also educate them as you go. So no matter where they are in their buying decision, or who in the organization you're actually speaking to, you can be relevant to them. And I think that's a really important thing, not only from an outbound marketing and sales perspective, but also from what content is providing to support your sales team. And yes, there's a lot of information on this, and this is something that in the next session we're going to be kind of deep diving into a little more. So as I mentioned, get your camera phones ready, because we've got our first question. So please feel free to scan and take a picture and respond.
So the purpose of this question is because whenever I've done this particular working session before, I'm very, very keen to understand the audience and to learn really more who's got any form of active lead generation strategy, no matter how big or how small. Doesn't matter if it's written on the back of a fag packet, or if it's something where maybe you've got an in-house marketing team, or you've got somebody that you've used externally and they're helping you build that roadmap. So it doesn't matter if it's got great big key objectives set for the whole year, or even if there's just a few little goals that as a business that you all want to achieve maybe on a quarterly basis. So we're not going to spend too much time just waiting for the answers. Interesting. Okay, so we've got.
Interestingly, nobody is saying yes, I think is the most
Yes,
important takeaway
that's
here.
exactly what I was just going to say. So I like the honesty. So what we've got 60% saying no and 40% saying kind of. I'm quite interested on the 40% actually. And so we're going to dig around a little bit later into that. But thank you for those of you that have just taken part in and created and scanned that QR code. So thank you very much for that. We'll hold on to those scores for a moment. So the next part. So another area that I've spoken about. So the new kid on the block at the moment is digital marketing. And most people that I speak to when I do talk about marketing strategy, they pride themselves on perhaps the fact that they've got something going on LinkedIn, or they're putting their business out on Instagram and Facebook and various other social media platforms. And they get frustrated. And I'm hearing various levels of disappointment when they say, but I'm not really getting very much from it. So as I said to you at the beginning of this, my experience goes back many, many decades over many industries. But the one industry I'm most proud of, and one that I believe I learnt my craft, was when I worked at Yellow Pages. And that's a brand name that a lot of you, if not all of you, will know and remember fondly. When we used to get businesses to pay to advertise in the Big Yellow Book, we used to actively say to businesses that when you pay to go in the likes of paper advertising that it was at the time, you're not paying to get new business. You're paying to go up against your competitors, because if you don't, you're simply forgotten about. Fast forward now to the world of digital, and digital in essence is exactly the same as what it was in terms of replacing the paper advertising. It's great that you can have a business presence on there, that you might be putting posts on there, but ultimately that's just going to keep your brand visible, because if you don't, you're forgotten about. And so a lot of businesses really focus on SEO activity or even PPC activity, all of which will drive various levels of information or hit rates or how many clicks that you've had. But actually the key question is, okay, you've now got your brand visible, but what do you do next? And so therefore, that's why telemarketing and digital marketing are really a great combination to have. Because by having that multi-layered approach, you're going to make sure you're optimizing your outreach, you're following up on those that have hit your landing pages, because it's not enough just to put your business out there and just hope that those businesses are then going to come to you. But equally, if you can run all of these items in isolation, but in doing so, you're going to have less of an impact than if you were to combine them all together. So next slide, please, Chris.
If you don't mind, I just want to add a couple of things to that. I think one of the big things that, so my background is marketing, but I've always really tried to foster a really strong relationship with sales, for several reasons. But one of the biggest reasons is not all campaigns and not all marketing activity drives drives leads that are people who are ready to buy right there and then. So by working with sales and really making sure they understand what marketing activity is happening, um, what content people are reading, what information the business has about that lead, it allows them to really tailor their conversation. So, the first conversation doesn't have to be an outbound cold call when you're thinking about telemarketing. It can be a follow-up to some marketing activity, but by arming people with the right information, you've through their level of interest in your content, they've really been able to almost self-profile themselves to you. So you can use that intelligence to really help your conversation and be a real valuable supplier to them.
So before we kind of get into the facts and some of the statistics that you need to think about, I thought this was quite an interesting comment from Stuart Lung, who used to be the SEO manager at Salesforce. And as you know, Salesforce is a great CRM tool to manage pipeline activity. Some of you may even use that particular CRM. But this particular gentleman was very well known for saying that even despite all the digital marketing that businesses may choose to deploy, is that a phone call will absolutely still get someone's attention much quicker than an email. And if you think about yourselves personally, how many emails that you may get that land in your spam folder, how many people are trying to pitch you products and wares, even just for something that you maybe have just cast your eye over. So what we recognize, and these are some statistics that are coming through from the likes of HubSpot, is, and I think I'll come onto that shortly in my next slide, is there was a very, very high percentile of CEOs that actually made their decision to buy particular products and services as a direct result of taking a phone call. Nothing to do with receiving an email, nothing to do necessarily with seeing something on a social media platform, but it was the phone call that got their attention much quicker, because you can be quite diverse in how you are landing your message, landing your proposition, but ultimately it's about making sure that your lead magnet is right for your audience. And that's at that point where you weave in your digital marketing. And that's where a phone call on top of that can really saturate your prospect audience that you're looking to achieve. So you're probably questioning, so what are the facts and how do we look at being able to do that? So Chris, if you can just take me to my next slide, please. So I don't know how many of you maybe have worked in businesses before where you've maybe had a salesperson or an internal admin person that maybe has been challenged with sitting down with a headset on and just phoning existing customers, or maybe just phoning a list that maybe has passed over somebody's desk. The planning for an effective lead generation campaign starts way before picking up the phone call. And as you can see there, data profiling is absolutely integral to the success of your campaign. So for example, at Televate, when we take a new client on board, we spend a lot of time not just understanding what is your desired data profile set, because most people have an aspiration, but actually it's understanding what is going to be the connection rate of that. A live example of that is a recent campaign that we've just onboarded actually, and it was an MSP, and they had aspirations to hit businesses that had got a minimum of 100 employees or 100 users. But their sweet spot for them as it stands at the moment was more around the 35 to 40. But naturally, like most MSPs, they were looking to stretch, they were looking to grow. However, what they'd failed to consider was actually the moment you start going into the 100 plus number of users or employees, is the ability to reach the decision maker becomes 10 times harder. So what happens is that funnel becomes a lot smaller regarding an attraction strategy. Some businesses are perfectly fine with that, but actually if you don't understand the complexities of how that data responds and what the connectivity to decision makers is going to be like, you become very disillusioned very quickly with maybe the poor results or the lower level of engagement that you may get. Brand persona is also another key one. So I've got the privilege of working with a lot of MSPs across the space, and every MSP, and rightly so, believes they are completely unique and they're very, very passionate about what they do. Because by and large, the people I speak to are the people that own that business. However, I'm sad to say that the messages that most MSPs go out with is what every single MSP goes out with. So what we do as an organisation is help businesses understand what is their true brand persona. What is your tone of voice? How do your customers describe you and see you? Because what we found when we've helped businesses do this level of research historically is how they like to perceive themselves is actually very, very different to maybe how their customer base sees themselves. So that's why working with a marketing business that can help build that brand persona, which is something that, my colleague Chris does incredibly well, all of a sudden you can really then start to build the picture, incorporate that with the data set that you're looking to target, and you start to build a very strong value add. Another one is script and structure. So again, MSPs, the skill within your businesses tends to be, and highly so, is IT related. But actually, what does great lead generation look like, whether it be from a digital marketing perspective or a picking up the phone? Most people dread cold calling. Some people absolutely love it, and they tend to be in the minority. But how does a good script deliver success? Well, it's based on structure. A lot of people don't know what that right structure is. So, for example, they may have a fleet of salespeople that are targeted at sitting down every Friday or every Monday with a list of customers that they've just got to pick up the phone with and try and get an appointment. One of the things that is key to know is actually when you do outreach in that way, shape, or form, is that actually the objective of picking up the phone and having a conversation isn't about trying to get an appointment, and it isn't about trying to make a sale. It's actually about trying to get an emotional engagement with that prospect that then opens up and wants to have further conversations with you with a view of then meeting you. And I liken this process very much to, we've all met people that with the best will in the world are trying to sell you a fantastic product or service, but you just don't like them as a person. For some reason, you're not clicking, you're clashing a little bit, and that's because they haven't had that emotional engagement with you. But yet there'll be other times when you've loved somebody that you've met, and actually the decision to buy their product or their service has almost been a little bit heart-led. And again, that's because that individual has made a great engaging emotional connection with you. So don't underestimate the value of having a very clear script, a very clear structure, but also with the objective of trying to win the heart and the mind of the prospect that you're reaching out to. Another key one is soft skills to succeed. It's not enough just to have a proposition or a script that says, this is who we are, this is who we offer, and actually this is why you should take us. It should be reverse engineered. It's about understanding what is your prospect buying style. So for example, if you're the kind of personality, if your own personal personality is very happy, very, very bubbly, very, very direct, but your prospect is a little bit more of a reflector, maybe is a little bit quieter, is a little bit more of an introvert, then that potentially could clash and the two could never evolve. So it's really about understanding your soft skills as an MSP. What is going to win the heart and the mind of that prospect? What is your communication style? And then that leads on to the coaching approach. Some of you may have contemplated recruiting somebody, maybe an office admin role, or maybe thinking about using somebody as an external an external individual that's coming into your business on a temporary basis to look at doing the lead generation for you. But actually, as an employer, you have a duty of care and a responsibility to coach that individual. And I've heard over many, many months and many years, actually, businesses say, well, I've spent a fortune on salaries, bringing someone into the company, trying to do lead generation, but they haven't delivered anything, so I've had to let them go. My question back to those particular individuals is, okay, well, what coaching and what development have you invested in that individual to make them successful? And a coaching statistic, which is for any business, whether you're an MSP or whether you're in retail or whatever the case may be, if you've recruited somebody into your business to sit there with a headset on, reaching out to prospects with a view of creating appointments for you, 65% of your working week should be spent coaching, feedback, and mentoring that individual. So a question that you need to ask yourself is, before I'm able to recruit resource to be able to attack that part of my lead generation strategy, am I both able, in both my own skills as a coach and also time that I can give to that person to make them effective in what they need to do? So there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to lead generation. And so you need to have a real good look internally at internal skill source, but also yourselves in being able to tick those 5 boxes. So Chris, is there anything you want to add to that before we move on to the next slide?
Not at all. I think you've covered it really well, TJ. I think I'd be waffling if I did.
Lovely. Okay, so the next slide, this is my personal favorite. So if we can just move on to the next slide. So this, whenever I've shown this slide historically, tends to be a bit of a shocker to the MSP community. So if you think about when you've spoken to prospects, or maybe if you've got some field sales people or you've got some internal people, these are some statistics that you might want to have in the back of your mind next time you're talking to them. So I said in an earlier slide about CEOs and how many of them have gone on to purchase and make a decision because of a cold call. So the source of this data is from HubSpot. 75% of prospects that were surveyed by HubSpot were motivated to join a meeting following a cold call. So it wasn't an email, it wasn't something that they saw on a social media platform, it was the engagement of a phone call from someone that had that emotional engagement and that encouraged that individual or showed that prospect why it's beneficial to have that meeting. So that's quite an interesting statistic. Now, I've been doing lead generation, telemarketing and telesales for a very, very long time. And when I go into businesses as a consultant and they say, oh, well, we make 50 to 60 calls each, but I'm just not getting through to anyone. The reality is it takes on average 400 phone calls to get one appointment. So if we think about what I call waterfall conversion metrics, in the end user space that the MSP community fishes in, decision maker contact rate will only ever be around 4%. If anybody tells you it's higher than that, they are lying. And I will absolutely put my name to that. Because an average business has over 100 cold calls a day going through their reception. So if you think about some of your clients that you have, they will have phone calls from janitorial suppliers, telco companies, recruitment companies, utility companies. And that receptionist is paid to keep the likes of us cold calling creatures out. So you can see now why, to be an effective telemarketing person and to generate appointments, you need to be able to have the dedicated time and resource it takes. So just to put it into perspective, my callers make an average of between 85 and 100 phone calls a day. So on average, within the end user space, you would typically expect to generate around 0.4 end user appointments per day. So therefore, you can see now why it takes circa the 400 calls to get you one appointment. Now, when you think about we're making those phone calls, great, we've got our head in that space, we're going to be making 85 calls a day. What you need to be prepared for is 80% of those cold calls will go to voicemail. But alarmingly, that 90% of first-time voicemails are never returned. You know, if you think about yourselves, we're super busy people. I know personally, if I have a phone call on my phone and it's number withheld, I certainly don't answer it. I let it go to voicemail. And actually, I might listen to voicemails, not daily, it might be every other day. And if it's certainly a company I've not had that already communication involvement with, I never reply. So please be mindful as well that just because you've made one phone call and you're expecting maybe a prospect to call you back, the probability is that they won't. Now, this is a great statistic, and this just shows how the importance of having that emotional engagement. So 63% of businesses that were surveyed by HubSpot said that the prospects felt the people who'd made the cold calls to them didn't find out their needs, and that the salesperson spent the majority of the time on their calls showboating about why they were wonderful, but also why the business was wonderful that they were calling on behalf of. So they felt a bit as a second-rate citizen in the phone call that is directly to them with a view of trying to get them to take an appointment. But interestingly, the salespeople who spoke to those prospects, 75% of those people thought they were spot on and they knew that prospect and they felt really comfortable with their pitch. So ultimately, you've got two different parties and never the twain would meet. So going back to why it's really important to have a script and why it's really, really important to be able to have effective questioning techniques to understand what's important to that prospect. Otherwise, you're going to have two parties going in completely different directions. And the reality is, people hate cold calling. You know, if you think about yourselves personally, when was the last time you dedicated maybe 2 or 3 days solidly without any interruption, just picking up the phone and making those 85 phone calls a day? It's probably something that you wouldn't want to do. And in all the years that I've trained telesales and telemarketing people, there's something that I always call phonophobic. It doesn't matter how many years somebody may have been picking up the phone to making appointments, having to pick up the phone for a new business or a new organization can be really daunting because it's the fear of rejection and nobody really likes that. But the great news is there are businesses out there, just like us here at Televate, and we thrive on making those cold calls and working through those prospect lists and making those emotional engagements with prospects. So all is not lost. There is great skill out there in the marketplace and that can go on to really support and help build your business and your prospect pipeline. And then something that I'm not doing at the moment, because I'm on a webinar, is if you hear your voice more than the prospect when you are putting those phone calls into your prospects, stop talking. I always liken it very much to, if you're doing all the talking, how do you not know they've gone and put the phone down, gone and made a cup of tea, come back, and you're still talking? So always make sure that when you are when you are doing your pitch or you are doing your script, just every now and again, stop and pause, ask them a question, ask them what their thoughts were on what you've just said, ask them how they think or how they feel about something that you've just said. That way, if you randomly drop a question in like that, you'll know if you've got their true engagement or not. A bit like what we did earlier on by just dropping in there a bit of a whole exercise for you. So those are just some interesting facts there from a telemarketing perspective. And as we go through the series, we're going to be delving a lot more into some of these particular areas, but why they're also really important to work alongside a digital marketing strategy, which are going to be some of the sessions that Chris will be sharing with you shortly. So now we've shared a little soundbite of some of the facts. We want you to get a little bit finger happy again. So if you can just get your phones at the ready and scan the QR code that you can see there, what we want to do is we're going to create a word cloud. So in one word, how would you describe your lead generation strategies? So for the 60% of you that say you haven't got one, put any word in you wanted to describe that. And then the 40% of you that said you kind of, we're really interested to find out what one word you would describe to use your lead generation strategies at the moment. So without further ado, can you just give us a word? Wow, okay, so we've got clumsy, inconsistent, blunt. That's an interesting one, okay. Flaky, incomplete. There's got to be more than 5 words. If you want to put another word in, feel free. Oh, sassy. It's interesting, when I did this at CompTIA, somebody, I think it was Greg Jones from Datto, he put pineapple. So I don't know why he chose to do that.
There were
Any
some
other words?
really
Any
funny
other
responses to
words?
some of them at CompTIA.
Okay, so we'll just go with, oh, incomplete. Mango. Oh, here we go. There's always a funny one. Okay, Well, that's, oh, no, can we just go back, Chris? So that's quite interesting. So if we look at inconsistent, incomplete, flaky and clumsy, you know, they're all in the same kind of genre, aren't they? And I can probably bet my bottom dollar along with Chris is actually the reason why it may feel like it's clumsy or it may feel like it's incomplete or flaky is because some of the components that Chris and I will be discussing and sharing with you over the next 3 months, it could be that just one of those key elements is missing. And that if that's considered and if that's put into play, all of a sudden you start to create a very fluid marketing journey. So it will be quite interesting to revisit this word cloud maybe a couple of months down the line if some of you do take away some of the key action points and look at deploying them within your marketing strategy, or even if you just start to think about just putting a bit of thought to what would one look like for your business. So thank you for those that have just popped those names in. So Chris, next slide, please. So kind of coming to a close now, but these would be my personal key takeaways before I hand over to Chris. So for those of you that are still on the webinar and you maybe go away and you think about, okay, I want to put something together for 2024. I maybe want to increase my client base by 10%, 20%, what have you, is that the most important thing is make sure you've got a lead magnet. The IT space, the MSP community is such a saturated industry. And we see that more and more with the MSP campaigns that we do. So you need to make sure that your lead magnet is really attractive. And I always liken it to when you speak to your prospects, they may very well already have an MSP in place. The last thing you want to do is to call their current baby ugly. So it's about thinking about what kind of lead magnet could you deploy that's going to be of real interest for one of your prospects that's going to want to work with you. Undoubtedly, some of you are going to be sending out emails, to maybe your current existing customer base or to a prospect base. Don't rely on the fact that you think an email is going to cut through it. Don't be frightened to maybe have a call out day, even if it's just once a month, and just follow up on those emails. And Chris is going to help you over the next couple of sessions on how to get the most out of your email activity. Don't forget that statistic. You know, you need to be looking at making 100, 120 calls a day you'd be topping out at. You could probably get away with 85. And if you do that, you'd be lucky if you speak to 4.8 people. You may not even get a full sales pitch out or a prospect pitch out, but that's the reality of what it takes to get through to people. Understand the key pain points for the sector that you're calling. You may flourish in the legal space or you may flourish in the insurance domain, but actually truly understanding what the key points are for that sector will undoubtedly help when it comes to referring to those when asking your discovery questions that are relevant. And another key one here is remember, nurture those leads. So working with various MSPs, it still surprises me when they say, yeah, once I've followed up on a prospect after 2 or 3 times, I just assume they're not interested. And so I just leave them. It's actually a known industry statistic that it can take up to between 8 and 12 follow-up actions to win again the heart and the mind of a prospect before you get them over the line. So if you think back to maybe some of the prospects that you've worked with over 2023, 2022, how much business have you actually left on the table because you haven't made enough follow-up actions? It's a bit like that drawing that some of you may have seen, which is a guy with a pickaxe and they're both pickaxing for the diamond, and the one turns around and walks away when he's maybe a foot or two away from it, but the other guy keeps going. Just remember that. It can take up to 12 follow-up actions to get something over the line. And then last by no means least, the prospect is way, way more important than you are. You know, make sure that your prospect is front and center of what you do every single day. So those would be my key 6 takeaways when it comes to the world of lead generation in telemarketing. Chris, what are your takeaways?
So I think a couple of my biggest takeaways that we've touched on today, firstly relates to the buyer journey that we presented, and the fact that when you're speaking to, marketing to, producing your amazing content, you've got to understand the journey that your buyer goes through to be able to be truly relevant to them. And that's from an outbound perspective, you're producing physical content, but then from a sales perspective, being able to tailor your conversation as soon as you recognize where that person is in the buyer journey. If they're right at the end and they are at the supplier selection element, they're in the 5%, the 5% that's in market to buy, that's kind of the maximum within any market. The second one is that marketing isn't always just about generating inquiries. Actually, marketing is a service for a business. By that, I mean, when you've got customer-facing salespeople, business dev guys, actually, marketing needs to really understand how they can support their sales activity. Speaking to somebody, sending emails, etc., isn't enough. It's making sure that those guys are armed with the information and the content they need to really drive the prospect through the pipeline.
Actually, I think there's one takeaway that we've both forgotten, Chris, and that is, you can be doing all this wonderful lead generation and prospect building, but you ultimately need a CRM or a tool that's going to help you better manage the journey from the point of inception right the way through to execution. And that's one thing where you need a tool very much like Zementum. So Zementum will absolutely help you steer your way through that prospect minefield, because let's face it, no one likes to be working off spreadsheets. No one wants to be working off post-it notes and little tickets everywhere. But actually, how much of your journey do you need to know? Well, you need to know all of it. At what point does the business choose? At what point does your prospect turn into an engagement? How soon is it till they first transact? What then does their lifespan with you start to look like? And so a tool like Zementum will absolutely help you manage and measure your prospect pipeline.
I was going to deliver a takeaway, but you've already done my pitch for me.
Sorry, Ben.
No, it's fine. I was going to say, lead generation isn't hard if you're consistent, I think was the thing that I learned when running my MSP. And the other thing is that whole map of the touch points is incredibly important. It's very easy as a small business to focus on one touch point. We're going to do SEO to try and drive that web traffic. We're going to do paid advertising, or we're going to do the Facebook ads, or we're going to do the LinkedIn ads, and you do it for a few months and nothing happens. You don't get the results. You've got to remember that there are all of those touch points. You need to be touching prospects across several of them. Starts to sound really dirty. You've got to be touching your prospects across as many of these touch points as possible, and you've got to be consistent about it. What TJ was looking at today, a lot of it really just comes down to the raw statistics of it. The number of calls you need to be making, the number of emails you need to be making leads to the number of booking calls you need to be booking, leads to the number of meetings you need to be having, leads to the number of proposals you're sending, leads to the number of negotiations you're having, leads to the number of clients you're onboarding. Like it really is just a numbers game. And if you can implement a consistent strategy that just repeats and ideally iterates to improve, you can try new strategies and you can move things around, but you've just got to be consistent and put in the numbers. And as long as you're doing that, you're going to get the numbers out the other side. Should we just give a little bit more of a reminder about the upcoming sessions? So as we said at the beginning, there are 3 more sessions here. This first one was focusing really on that lead generation piece. The next session, we're going to be looking at bumps in the road, how to stabilize your pipeline. So we're going to navigate the peaks and troughs of client wins with tried and tested strategies, learn the art of poor planning avoidance, defining your target audience, selecting marketing channels, setting effective targets and KPIs for the business. So join us on the next one as we build towards an always on approach to pipeline generation. The third session, hopefully, I think sometime in March, probably the way things are going, deal or no deal, master the art of closing deals. And that's definitely where Zementum comes into play massively by helping you to build those really compelling proposals and manage the sales pipeline. You're going to learn how to understand who controls, who owns the control of that close. Is it right to chase the prospect or not to chase? How do we pin down commitment from the prospects? And ultimately, don't let those potential clients slip away. Learn the secrets to sealing the deal. And then the last session, fourth session, probably into April at some point, or very beginning of Q2, you've won that client. What now? Congratulations on landing a new client. That's great. But now it's time to navigate the challenges and turn them into loyal customers. So we're going to be looking at how to manage seamless handoffs to account management, understanding those client needs and putting in place proactive strategies to properly manage them, and really discover the keys to maintaining lasting client relationships.
Thanks, Ben.
So if you want to get in touch with anyone, definitely recommend getting in touch with TJ and Chris. They're over here in the UK, but they do work with clients globally. They will deal with the entire lead generation, marketing, sales problem for you. You can learn it all with us, or you can just let them do it, quite frankly. I know which one I would do. If you aren't a Zementum customer, you want to have a look at Zementum, head over to zementum.com. You can also reach out to us by email, info@zementum.com. We would be delighted to hear from you. Any final points to add, TJ or Chris?
No, nothing from me. We've now got
Me,
the
Ben.
four-legged friends going mental. So it's going to be a goodbye from me if there are no questions. And hopefully it's been a little bit of a soundbite in terms of what we do. But the next 3 sessions, I think, are going to be really informative and you should really enjoy them. But thank you for allowing us to join you, Ben.
Super. Thank you very much. Go look after the dogs and have a wonderful rest of the day or evening. Thanks, everyone.